Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The hum of the Galactic Council chambers was typically filled with the quiet chatter of leaders from across the galaxy, their voices bouncing off the high marble walls. Delegates from every corner of space, representing species of every shape, size, and form, gathered here to discuss matters of galactic peace, trade, and survival. Today, however, there was a buzz in the air that was unlike any before. A new member had arrived. Zyria, the Nixaran delegate, was a familiar sight at these proceedings, a slender figure with an air of quiet authority, known for her calm demeanor and sharp intellect. But today it wasn't Zyria at the center of the commotion. The council members were abuzz with murmurs about an unexpected new arrival, one whose presence had many wondering if the galaxy had truly reached a point where anything was possible. A petite figure, no taller than 4 feet, entered the chamber, a tiny alien who seemed almost lost among the tall, imposing forms of the other delegates. She had green skin that shimmered under the fluorescent lights, eyes like sparkling emeralds, and a short, finely braided mane that fell just to her shoulders. Her delicate appearance was deceiving, however. Though small in stature, there was a confidence about her that seemed to command attention. The council room fell silent as the new member took her seat at the table, drawing curious glances from all sides. The Zarkan Federation's representative, Lord Naren, shifted uneasily in his seat. He was a towering figure, almost 9 feet tall, and the presence of this diminutive alien unsettled him, though he would never admit it openly. Zyria, who had been sitting at her usual position, raised an eyebrow in curiosity. She had heard rumors of a new member being assigned to the council, but nothing had prepared her for the appearance of this petite creature. She didn't appear to be from any major power in the galaxy, and yet here she was, seated at the table of the most powerful representatives in existence. The alien's name was Silra, and she hailed from a little-known system on the outskirts of the galaxy, known as Velzara. Despite her size, Silra's people had long been respected for their ability to broker peace between warring factions, a skill honed over generations of balancing delicate negotiations. Her species, though small, had a history of resilience that made them formidable in their own way. Silra's first words were spoken softly but clearly. "I am honored to be here today," she began, her voice lilting yet strong. "Though my size may be small, my commitment to the peace and prosperity of our galaxy is unwavering. I look forward to working with each of you." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and then the council erupted into polite applause. Some members seemed genuinely intrigued, others more skeptical. Zyria, however, was watching her closely. There was something magnetic about the petite alien, a quiet strength that seemed to transcend her physical appearance. Silra had already proven herself to be an excellent negotiator, having worked with various factions in the distant reaches of the galaxy. Her people were known for their intelligence and ability to empathize with even the most stubborn of negotiators. It was said that a single conversation with Silra could turn even the most violent of disputes into a peaceful resolution. Kalen, Zyria's closest ally and a well-respected figure in the Nixaran delegation, leaned over to whisper, "I've heard the stories, Zyria. They say Silra's people can persuade even the most hardened of hearts." Zyria nodded thoughtfully. "It's not just her words that are powerful, Kalen. It's her presence. Despite her size, she commands respect, and that is something few can do." The session began with the usual discussions about trade routes and planetary defense, but it didn't take long for the conversation to turn to more sensitive matters. The threat of unrest from the Zarkan Federation was growing, and tensions were running high. The council had already been divided over how best to address this emerging crisis, and many wondered if they would be able to avoid war. Zolthar, the powerful leader of the Zarkan Federation, had long been an advocate for military might over diplomacy. His people believed that peace could only be achieved through strength, and they were prepared to defend that belief with overwhelming force if necessary. Lord Naren spoke up, his voice booming across the chamber. "It is clear that the Nixaran vision for peace has failed. The Zarkans will no longer tolerate the weakness of appeasement. We need action, not words." The room fell quiet as Zyria prepared to respond. Her voice was calm and measured, but her words carried weight. "Peace is not weakness, Lord Naren. It is our greatest strength. We have seen how the power of unity has transformed many worlds, and we must not give in to fear." Naren sneered. "Unity is nothing more than an illusion. The strong will always rule, and the weak will be left behind." Before Zyria could reply, a soft voice interrupted. "That may be true for some," Silra said, her voice carrying across the room. All eyes turned toward her as she stood. "But what if the true power lies not in the strength of one, but in the strength of many. What if the true test of power is not in how many we can defeat, but in how many we can bring together? Her words sent a ripple of shock through the room. Few had expected such boldness from someone so small, yet there was an undeniable power in her voice. Silra didn't just speak to the council, she spoke to the hearts of those present, as if she understood their innermost fears and desires. Ziria observed with admiration. Silra was speaking not as a conqueror but as a peacemaker. Someone who knew that true strength came from understanding and cooperation, not domination. It was a philosophy Ziria herself shared, but to hear it voiced so plainly by someone so unlikely was both inspiring and humbling. Lord Naren scowled, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Silra had captured their attention, and for the first time that day the council seemed to pause, reconsidering their assumptions. The galaxy is vast, Silra continued, her voice steady. We are many but we are also fragile. If we are to survive the trials ahead, we must not see each other as enemies but as allies. We must stop looking at our differences and start recognizing our shared interests. The strength of the many is far more powerful than the strength of the few. Ziria felt a surge of hope rise within her. This small alien, this woman who had barely made a ripple when she entered the chamber, was beginning to turn the tide. Her words carried the weight of truth, and in that moment, it seemed as though the very foundations of the Galactic Council were shifting. The Galactic Council's grand arena, nestled within the heart of Elysium, was a space designed for spectacle. Massive columns of steel and crystal reflected the light of distant stars, and the air was thick with the murmurs of representatives from hundreds of species, each one anticipating a demonstration that would showcase the might and power of the newest member to the council. Ziria, the petite Nixaran, had been summoned to display her species' capabilities in an event that many assumed would be an easy contest of strength. As Ziria entered the center of the arena, the voices of the spectators quieted. The challenge had been set by the Zarkan Federation, one of the most physically powerful species known throughout the galaxy. The Zarkans were a towering race, standing between 9 and 12 feet tall with muscles that rippled like waves of molten steel. Their representative for the day, Zolthar, stepped forward confidently, casting a long shadow across the arena. He wore a smile that bordered on smug, believing his strength would easily overpower any opponent, especially one who appeared to be no more than a child in comparison. Let us see what you've got, little one, Zolthar boomed, his voice like thunder. If you cannot meet the challenge of strength, perhaps you will learn something about your place in this galaxy. Ziria's small frame stood resolutely in the face of his taunts. She was undeterred, her eyes calm and unblinking. Despite the Zarkan's obvious taunts and the spectacle he was attempting to create, Ziria's mind was already far beyond the physical confrontation. This would not be about brute strength. This would be about showing the galaxy that power came in many forms, not just the physical. The challenge set before them was the lifting of a massive, towering stone pillar, thousands of kilograms of rock suspended upright in the center of the arena. The rules were simple. Whoever could lift the stone above their head for a full minute would claim victory. Many species had already seen the spectacle of Zarkan strength, and many expected the result to be a foregone conclusion. Zolthar approached the pillar, his enormous hands wrapping around the thick stone with ease. He flexed his muscles, eyes narrowing with effort. The audience leaned forward in anticipation as Zolthar began to grunt, his every muscle straining as he attempted to lift the pillar. But try as he might, the stone did not budge. The crowd waited in anticipation, the tension in the air palpable. Zolthar gritted his teeth and pushed harder, his large body rippling with exertion, but still nothing. The pillar remained firmly in place as if mocking his strength. The murmurs of disbelief grew louder. Some representatives from the audience shifted uncomfortably, clearly unaccustomed to seeing such a powerful being struggle. With a final, frustrated roar, Zolthar stepped back, his chest heaving with effort. He turned to Ziria, his pride stung, and scoffed. "You'll never be able to do it either, little one. It's too heavy even for me." Ziria did not flinch at his words. She took one graceful step forward, her delicate hands raised, her fingers barely moving as she extended them toward the pillar. The crowd grew silent as they watched the petite figure take command of the arena with such ease and poise. A subtle shift seemed to occur in the air as Ziria focused, her eyes narrowing slightly, her breathing steady and measured. "Strength comes from focus, Zolthar," she said softly, her voice carrying across the silent arena. "Not from size or brute force." There was a hum in the air, a vibration almost imperceptible at first, before the pillar began to shift. Slowly at first, and then more decisively, the heavy stone lifted off the ground, hovering just a few inches above the floor. The audience gasped. No one had expected this. Ziria, a being barely a quarter of Zolthar's size, was lifting the pillar without breaking a sweat. The stone floated effortlessly, held aloft by something far more powerful than muscles. The Zarkan representative's eyes widened in disbelief as the stone floated higher, gently rising until it was level with Ziria's chest. Her control was perfect, her expression serene. She moved the stone, almost like an extension of her will, lifting it higher until it hovered just over her head. The crowd was awestruck, many of them now questioning everything they thought they knew about strength and power. Zolthar's jaw hung slack, his pride now completely shattered. His entire race, known for their unmatched physical prowess, had just been bested, not by strength but by something far more refined. Ziria lowered the stone gently back to the ground, the act done with an effortless grace that made her seem like a dancer rather than a competitor. The silence that followed was thick with astonishment. For a long moment no one moved. Then, as if on cue, the first burst of applause rippled through the arena, quickly growing into a thunderous ovation. The delegates from various species were in awe. Ziria had shown them something none of them had expected. Something that spoke not only to the power of her species but to the potential of every being in the galaxy. As the applause continued, Kalen, the human representative, stood in quiet reflection. He had seen many demonstrations of physical power in his time with the Council, but none had ever affected him like this. What Ziria had demonstrated was not just power, it was an entirely new way of thinking. A power that wasn't tied to size or strength, but to understanding, discipline, and mastery over one's environment. Ziria turned to face the assembled delegates, her face calm but her eyes glowing with the quiet confidence that had propelled her through the demonstration. "This is the strength of my people, but it is not just a matter of physics," she explained. "It is a reflection of the way we approach the universe, calm, controlled, and connected." The other representatives exchanged glances, each one processing the demonstration in their own way. Some, like the massive form of Zolthar, struggled to reconcile this new understanding of strength with their own beliefs. Others, more open-minded, found themselves intrigued. Kalen, for one, was already deep in thought, considering the implications of what he had witnessed. The council's leader, an ancient being of energy known only as the Hroth, turned to Ziria with a smile of approval. "Your demonstration has made a powerful statement, Nixaran representative. You've proven that power does not always take the shape we expect." Ziria gave a nod of acknowledgement, though her expression remained neutral. "Thank you, but this is only the beginning. There is more to strength than physical force, and I hope to show you that in time." As the crowd began to disperse, Kalen approached Ziria, his mind buzzing with 1,000 questions. He had never before met someone who had so effortlessly defied everything he thought he knew about strength. "You've certainly made an impression," Kalen said, his voice laced with respect. Ziria's eyes met his, and for a brief moment he saw something deeper, something that transcended the display of power. "Thank you, Kalen. But this is just one example of what my people believe. Strength, in the end, is not about the size of the body or the force of the blows. It is about how one uses their mind, their heart, and their soul to shape the world around them." Kalen found himself captivated, not by the power she demonstrated, but by the conviction behind her words. It was a philosophy he had never encountered before, one that seemed both simple and profound at the same time. The arena was emptying now, but Kalen could not shake the feeling that, in that moment, something had shifted in him. He had learned something valuable not just about Ziria but about what it meant to be truly powerful. And deep down, Kalen knew that Ziria's impact on the galaxy was only just beginning. The days following the arena demonstration were filled with debates and discussions. Ziria's display had shaken the foundations of many deeply held beliefs in the Galactic Council, but there was still much to be learned. Kalen couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. Ziria had not only demonstrated her species' control over the laws of physics, but had also challenged the very nature of power and strength in a way that made him question everything he thought he knew. He found himself seeking out more conversations with her, trying to understand the depths of her philosophy. One evening, after the council's work had concluded for the day, Kalen found himself walking through the winding, pristine corridors of the council's chambers. The tall, towering windows stretched high above him, framing the view of distant stars and planets in the ever-expanding galaxy. He had been thinking about the future of the galaxy, about his people and theirs. He didn't expect to see Ziria standing by one of the observation windows, gazing out into the vastness of space. She looked almost ethereal, bathed in the light of distant stars, her delicate features soft yet resolute. She turned her head slightly when she noticed him approaching, a quiet, knowing smile spreading across her face. "I thought I might find you here," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that immediately put Kalen at ease. "Can't stop thinking about your demonstration," Kalen admitted, leaning against the wall beside her. "You've turned the whole council on its head with that display. No one expected it, least of all me." Ziria's gaze remained fixed on the stars for a moment, as though considering his words. "I don't want to be seen as some kind of spectacle. That was never my intention," she said, her voice thoughtful. Kalen studied her closely, his brow furrowing in curiosity. "Then why do it? Why put yourself in front of so many people?" Ziria turned toward him then, her large eyes meeting his with a gaze that felt as though it could see straight into his soul. "Because power is more than what we show on the outside. It's not just about how strong you are or how big your body is. It's about how you approach the world, how you understand the space you inhabit, and how you shape the relationships around you." Kalen considered her words carefully. "So, you want to change how the galaxy thinks about strength? About power?" Ziria nodded slowly, her expression serene. "I believe the galaxy has been built on a foundation of fear. The strongest survive, and the weakest are left behind. But what if strength isn't something you fight for? What if it's something you nurture, something that allows you to build, to grow, and to create?" Kalen felt a stir of something unfamiliar in his chest. He had always prided himself on his logical approach to diplomacy, his ability to see the situation from all angles and make the best possible decision. But there was something about Ziria's words that resonated with him in a way that nothing else ever had. He had always believed that strength came from external sources, military might, alliances, resources, but she was speaking of something deeper, something more intangible. "I've spent my life believing that strength was a resource," Kalen said quietly. "That it was about what you could command, what you could control. But now I'm not so sure. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's more to it than I ever realized." Ziria smiled gently, her expression warm and understanding. "It's not about control, Kalen. It's about connection. True strength comes from the relationships you forge, the trust you build, and the love you give. That's what we as Nixorans believe. Strength comes from within, and it is reflected in everything we do." There was a pause between them, a silence that stretched for a few moments as Kalen processed her words. He had always admired Ziria's quiet confidence, but now he saw a deeper layer to it. It wasn't just about her powers, her control over gravity or matter. It was about her ability to connect with others on a level that transcended physical boundaries. "Ziria," Kalen said softly, his voice barely a whisper, "you've changed the way I see the universe. Not just in terms of power but in terms of what it means to be strong. I've spent so much time thinking about what I can do, what I can achieve through force, that I never considered the possibility of strength and connection. In love." Ziria's gaze softened, and for a moment her eyes glimmered with something deeper, an understanding that reached far beyond the physical world. "You understand now, Kalen. Strength isn't in the things we take, it's in the things we give. In the way we treat others, in the way we show kindness and compassion. That is the true strength of the heart." Kalen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle into his chest. He realized, with startling clarity, that he had never truly understood what it meant to love, to connect with others on a level that went beyond duty or strategy. He had always been a man of logic, of reason, but Ziria was showing him that sometimes, logic and reason couldn't explain the depth of the emotions that ran through the universe. Without thinking, he stepped a little closer to her, the space between them narrowing. Ziria looked up at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. It wasn't the first time they had been close, but this time, something felt different. The air between them seemed to hum with an energy that wasn't just physical. It was emotional, a bond that was beginning to form in ways Kalen had never expected. "I've never met anyone like you, Ziria," Kalen said softly, his voice low and sincere. She smiled, a soft and genuine smile that seemed to light up her face. "And I've never met anyone like you, Kalen. You see things in ways that others can't." In that moment, Kalen understood something deeper than just philosophy or strength. There was something about Ziria that drew him in, a magnetism that wasn't just about her mind but about her spirit. The connection he felt with her was beyond anything he had experienced before, something that spoke to him on an emotional and intellectual level, in a way that was both unexpected and profound. They stood there for a long moment, the sounds of the distant stars filling the silence around them. For the first time in his life, Kalen realized that what he had been missing wasn't power or control. It was connection. And he had found it in Ziria, in the way she had quietly but powerfully opened his eyes to a new understanding of the universe. Ziria's soft voice broke through the silence. I think we have much to learn from each other, Kalen. The galaxy is vast and we each bring something unique to the table. If we truly want to build something better, we'll need to understand each other. And that starts with the heart. Kalen's heart seemed to beat in rhythm with hers. He nodded slowly, his eyes locking with hers as he finally understood what had been missing all along. It wasn't just the strength of mind or body that defined a person. It was the strength of love, of connection, that truly shaped the universe. I'm ready to learn, he said quietly. And I think I've found the person who can teach me. Ziria's smile deepened, and in that moment, Kalen knew that his journey and the journey of the galaxy had just begun. Together they would build something new, something that transcended the limits of physical power and reached into the heart of the cosmos itself. As the days passed, the connection between Kalen and Ziria deepened, both professionally and personally. Their shared vision for a galaxy built on mutual understanding rather than force and power began to take root within the council. What had once seemed like a distant dream was now a spark, catching the attention of leaders across the galaxy. But not everyone was ready to embrace this new way of thinking. The Zarkan Federation, still reeling from the defeat in the arena, found their pride wounded in ways that went beyond their physical strength. Zolthar, the Zarkan representative, seethed with resentment, unwilling to accept that a race so small could possess such power. He began to rally his people, calling for a return to the traditional values of strength and domination that had served the Zarkans for millennia. He felt personally humiliated by Ziria's demonstration and by the shift in perception that was happening in the council. Behind closed doors, the Zarkan representatives worked tirelessly to undermine the Nixaran influence, making subtle moves to prevent Ziria's philosophy from taking hold. They spread rumors, cast doubt on her abilities, and questioned whether the galaxy should follow a species so fundamentally different from the others. Kalen, sensing the rising tension, found himself caught in the middle of an ideological battle. While his personal convictions were aligned with Ziria's beliefs, he had to navigate the delicate political landscape of the council. It wasn't just about principles anymore, it was about maintaining peace and unity in a galaxy that was often divided by centuries-old conflicts. One evening, as the two of them walked through the council's headquarters, Kalen could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He glanced at Ziria, whose usual calm demeanor seemed unshaken, though he could sense a quiet determination in her steps. Ziria, he said, his voice tinged with concern, I'm not sure how much longer the council can hold together. The Zarkans are getting more vocal in their opposition, and some of the other species are starting to listen to them. They're afraid of what you represent. Ziria's eyes remained fixed on the path ahead as she considered his words. Fear is a powerful motivator, she said softly, her voice steady. But fear can also be overcome. We cannot change the galaxy in one day, Kalen. It's a long road and we must be patient. Change happens when hearts and minds are ready, not when we force them. But what if they're never ready? Kalen asked, frustration creeping into his tone. What if the galaxy remains divided? What if they never accept the idea that strength isn't something to be wielded but something to be shared? Ziria stopped walking, turning to face him. Her eyes, usually so calm and composed, now glimmered with a quiet intensity. If we abandon the idea of unity, if we abandon the idea of compassion, then we have already lost. Our purpose here isn't to convince everyone immediately. It's to start the conversation, to plant the seeds of a different way of thinking. The rest will follow in time. Kalen sighed, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. He had spent most of his life focused on negotiations, on finding compromises that worked for everyone, but what Ziria was asking for was something more radical. Something that would require patience and trust, not just in others but in the process of change itself. I know you're right, Kalen said, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. But what if this isn't just about changing minds? What if it's about changing hearts? Some people won't be willing to listen to reason, no matter how many times we explain it. Ziria's smile was small but reassuring. Then we speak from the heart, Kalen. We don't try to change them in one conversation. We show them through our actions that what we're offering is real. Love, connection, understanding, it's not a theory, it's a way of living. Kalen took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had always been a man of logic, a man who believed in practical solutions. But Ziria had opened his eyes to something far more elusive, the power of emotional connection, the kind of strength that transcended reason and physical might. As the two of them continued their walk, Kalen's mind raced with possibilities. What would it take to unite the galaxy? What would it take to make others see that strength wasn't about domination or fear, it was about understanding, compassion, and trust. The answer, he realized, wasn't just about finding a solution. It was about showing the galaxy, one person at a time, that there was a better way. The next day, the council convened for a critical session. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the unspoken fear that had been building over the past few weeks. Zolthar and the Zarkan representatives had taken every opportunity to oppose Ziria's proposals, framing her ideas as a naive attempt to weaken the council's ability to defend itself against external threats. "Do you truly believe," Zolthar's voice boomed across the chamber, "that we can maintain peace by simply talking, by sharing our feelings and understanding one another? We are a galaxy of warriors, of survivors. We have been forged in the fires of conflict, and that is what has made us strong. Without strength we are nothing." Ziria stood quietly at her podium, her small frame seeming almost fragile in contrast to the towering figure of Zolthar. But there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. "Strength is not just about surviving, Zolthar," she said calmly. "It is about thriving. It is about building something greater than ourselves. The greatest power lies not in taking but in giving. Not in conquering but in lifting one another up." The room fell into silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Kalen watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. He knew that Ziria wasn't just speaking to Zolthar, she was speaking to the entire galaxy. But Zolthar was not easily deterred. "You speak of giving, Nixarin, but what of those who would take from us? What of the enemies that lurk beyond our borders, waiting to strike? Can we afford to be weak in the face of that?" Ziria did not flinch. "We do not need to be weak to show kindness. We do not need to abandon our defenses to practice compassion. What I am offering is not a surrender, Zolthar. It is an evolution. A way of being that does not rely on fear or force, but on unity and strength of heart." The room buzzed with murmurs as delegates from various species exchanged glances. Some were clearly unsettled by the idea of abandoning the old ways, while others seemed intrigued by Ziria's vision. Kalen stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Ziria's philosophy does not negate the need for defense, Zolthar. It simply adds a new dimension to how we view our relationships with one another. We are not proposing a retreat, we are proposing a shift in mindset. One that allows us to work together, to forge alliances, and to build a future that is based on trust, not fear." Zolthar's expression darkened, but he said nothing further. The debate had shifted, and for the first time, it seemed that the tide was turning. Ziria's words had struck a chord, and while the opposition was still strong, a glimmer of hope had begun to take root. The council, though divided, was slowly beginning to see the possibility of a different kind of strength, one that was not defined by size, power, or fear but by love, compassion, and connection. As the session drew to a close, Ziria and Kalen exchanged a brief, meaningful glance. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time they felt that they were on the right path. Together they would continue to fight for the vision they shared, a vision of a galaxy united not by force but by the heart. And in that moment, they both knew that the seeds of change had already been planted. In the weeks following the heated council debate, the situation grew increasingly tense. The division between those who supported Ziria's vision of unity and compassion, and those who adhered to the old ways of strength through fear, was becoming impossible to ignore. Zolthar's influence among the Zarkans was growing stronger, and his rhetoric was finding sympathetic ears across the galaxy. The Zarkan Federation had begun to rally other species that valued military might, convincing them that Ziria's vision was naive and dangerous. At the same time, a growing faction of progressive leaders, inspired by Ziria's philosophy, were pushing for reforms that prioritized diplomacy, mutual understanding, and shared strength. Kalen and Ziria had become an inseparable pair within the council. While Kalen's diplomatic expertise was crucial for navigating the political landscape, it was Ziria's quiet strength and unwavering belief in her cause that continued to inspire those around them. But as the months passed, the political chess game was growing more precarious. The galaxy was on the verge of a tipping point, one that could either bring about a new era of cooperation, or fracture into a violent struggle between those who feared change and those who embraced it. It was late one evening when Kalen and Ziria found themselves alone in a quiet garden near the council's chambers. The stars twinkled overhead, casting their soft light over the lush, otherworldly flora that thrived in the tranquil atmosphere. Kalen sat on a stone bench, his hands resting on his knees, deep in thought. Ziria stood beside him, gazing out at the stars, her posture relaxed but her expression somber. "I can feel the tension," Kalen said softly, breaking the silence. "The pressure is mounting, Ziria. The galaxy is pulling in two directions and neither side is willing to yield. Some of the more moderate factions are starting to speak out, but it's clear that the divide is growing wider. Ziria turned to look at him, her expression as composed as ever. I know. I feel it too. But this is the path we must walk. Change is never easy, Kalen. We knew from the start that the road would be difficult. What matters now is how we respond. Do we give in to fear and division, or do we stand firm in our belief that the galaxy can be united through understanding? Kalen sighed, rubbing his forehead. I wish I could see things as clearly as you do. The political landscape is shifting so rapidly, and I'm not sure which way it's going to tip. I know what I believe and I know what you believe, but it feels like the rest of the galaxy is still deciding. Ziria smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. We can't control how others think, Kalen. All we can do is continue to speak our truth. If the galaxy is ready to hear it, they will. If they're not, we will have to keep planting the seeds. Even the smallest seed can grow into something powerful, if it's nurtured properly. Kalen nodded slowly, but he couldn't shake the feeling of doubt that had begun to creep into his mind. The political pressure, the mounting opposition from the more aggressive factions, and the growing discontent among certain sectors of the council, it all felt like it was leading to an inevitable clash. He knew that Ziria's approach was the right one, but the time to convince the galaxy felt like it was running out. I just fear that we might be too late, Kalen said quietly. The galaxy is divided, and if the divisions continue to grow, it might be impossible to bring everyone together. Ziria turned to face him fully, her eyes locking with his. There was a depth in her gaze that was both reassuring and resolute. You've seen the power of unity firsthand, Kalen. When we came together to fight in the arena, it wasn't just about our strength, it was about the strength we found in each other. That same strength is out there waiting to be tapped. We just have to reach out and show people that it's possible. Kalen's chest tightened as he thought back to that fateful day in the arena. Ziria's incredible demonstration of strength and control had not just been about showcasing her power, it had been a testament to what was possible when different species came together in harmony. But could that kind of unity be replicated on a galactic scale? A distant rumble of thunder broke the quiet moment, and Ziria turned her gaze toward the sky. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied the clouds gathering overhead. The sudden shift in weather was an ominous sign, one that mirrored the storm brewing within the council. I think we've reached the tipping point, she said quietly. The time for words alone is over. The factions have chosen their sides, and now we must decide how far we're willing to go to show them that there is another way. Kalen felt a chill run down his spine as he absorbed her words. He knew she was right. The moment of decision had arrived. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was the only path they could follow if they truly wanted to change the future of the galaxy. The following week, the council convened for an emergency session. The debate was heated, as expected, with Zolthar and his allies demanding that the council reaffirm its commitment to military strength and dominance. They argued that Ziria's proposals were dangerous and unrealistic, and that the galaxy's survival depended on maintaining a strong defense against outside threats. Ziria stood at her podium, facing the assembly, her voice calm but filled with conviction. The greatest threat to our galaxy is not from those beyond our borders. It is from within. It is the fear and distrust that divides us, the belief that we must fight each other in order to survive. I am not asking for us to lay down our arms, I am asking for us to open our hearts. Zolthar scoffed from the opposite side of the room. Open our hearts? You want us to embrace our enemies, to show weakness when we should be preparing for war? You've gone too far, Nixrin. Your idealism will lead to our downfall. The room erupted in murmurs, with some delegates nodding in agreement with Zolthar's sentiments. Others, however, were listening intently to Ziria's words. Kalen observed the divided room, his mind working furiously. He knew that now was the moment to make the case, to push forward with everything they had built together. Stepping forward, Kalen addressed the council with authority. Zolthar's vision may have served the galaxy in the past, but the times are changing. We can no longer afford to rely solely on power and fear. We must evolve. Ziria's vision is not one of weakness but one of strength, a strength that is shared, not hoarded. If we continue down the path of division, we risk losing everything. For a long moment, the chamber fell silent. Kalen's words hung in the air, and he could feel the weight of the decision before them. There was no turning back now. And then, from the far side of the room, a voice spoke, a voice that had been silent for too long. I agree with Kalen. The room gasped as the elderly Korthan representative, known for his neutrality and wisdom, stood up. I have spent my life watching wars destroy this galaxy. I have seen the rise and fall of empires built on fear, and I have seen what happens when we lose our ability to trust each other. Perhaps it is time we considered another way. Ziria's eyes sparkled with gratitude, but she didn't speak. Instead, she let her actions speak louder than words. She extended her hand toward the Korthan representative, a symbol of unity that rippled through the room. Slowly, other representatives began to rise. Some in support, some with doubt, but all with the understanding that the galaxy was on the precipice of something monumental. The debate was not over, but the first cracks in the old order were beginning to form. For the first time in months, Kalen felt a glimmer of hope. It was small, but it was real. The battle was far from over, but the seeds of change had been planted, and Kalen and Ziria were determined to see them grow, no matter how long it took. The storm outside raged on, but in that moment, it felt as though a new dawn was beginning to break over the galaxy. The days following the Council's emergency session were filled with a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. Ziria's bold declaration of unity had made a significant impact. For the first time, there was a shift in the tide, a glimmer of hope that the vision she and Kalen had fought for could become a reality. But even as some factions began to warm to her ideas, others grew more resolute in their opposition. The Zarkan Federation, still unwilling to relinquish their hold on power, redoubled their efforts to discredit her and her cause. Zolthar was relentless, his rhetoric growing harsher with each passing day. He accused Ziria and Kalen of naivety, of leading the galaxy down a dangerous path of weakness. But it wasn't just his words that were causing trouble. His supporters were becoming more vocal, more militant. Rumors began circulating about possible uprisings among the Zarkans, as well as other species that had once embraced the old ways of strength through fear. Kalen, ever the diplomat, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to maintain the fragile alliances that had begun to form in the wake of the last council meeting. But as the days wore on, he realized that words alone might not be enough to hold the galaxy together. Ziria's vision, as inspiring as it was, needed action. The time for waiting was over. It was time for the galaxy to see the strength of unity in action. One evening, Kalen and Ziria met in a private chamber within the council's headquarters. The tension between them was palpable. Ziria's usual calm was tinged with something else, determination perhaps, or the weight of the responsibility she now carried. Kalen could see it in her eyes. Ziria, Kalen said, his voice low but urgent, we can't afford to wait any longer. The opposition is gathering strength, and if we don't act soon, we may lose the opportunity to change the galaxy for good. Ziria nodded, her expression unwavering. I know, Kalen. But we must be careful. Acting too rashly could lead to more conflict. We need to show the galaxy what we're fighting for, not just what we're fighting against. Kalen ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. But what if we're already too late? The Zarkans are pushing their agenda harder than ever, and other factions are starting to take notice. We can't wait for the galaxy to come to us, Ziria. We need to show them that our vision is more than just words. We need to demonstrate the power of unity. Ziria's eyes softened, and she stepped closer to him. I know you're afraid. I can feel the weight of it too. But we are not powerless. We are not fighting a war of armies, we are fighting a war of hearts and minds. If we can show the galaxy that unity, compassion, and understanding are not just ideals but a way of life, we can win this. Kalen met her gaze, his frustration turning to admiration. He had never met anyone like her, so calm, so resolute in the face of overwhelming odds. But Ziria was right. The true battle was not in the council chambers or on the battlefield. It was in the hearts of the people. Then let's show them, Kalen said, his voice firm. Let's show them what unity really looks like. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Ziria and Kalen knew that the time had come to take their message to the people. They could no longer rely on political maneuvering alone to win hearts and minds. It was time for a public demonstration. A grand gesture that would prove that the strength of unity was not just a theory but a tangible force that could change the galaxy. Ziria proposed a bold plan. A series of peace talks and public forums held on neutral ground, open to any species or faction that wished to participate. The idea was simple but powerful. Invite the galaxy to witness firsthand the power of dialogue, understanding, and shared strength. The hope was that by showing different species working together in peace, they could inspire others to do the same. The logistics were staggering, but Kalen's diplomatic network proved invaluable in organizing the event. Representatives from dozens of species, both supportive and opposing, were invited to attend. Zolthar, of course, refused to participate, but his absence only highlighted the contrast between his ideology and the one Ziria was promoting. As the day of the first forum approached, the anticipation was palpable. The council chamber had been transformed into a vast open space, with holographic displays projecting images of different species and their cultures, emphasizing the beauty of diversity. The central stage was simple but elegant, designed to reflect the idea of unity rather than dominance. Kalen stood at the front, watching as the final touches were made. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it, the turning point. Ziria had put everything on the line, and now it was up to the galaxy to decide whether they were ready to embrace change. Ziria entered the chamber just as the forum was about to begin. She walked gracefully across the room, her presence commanding attention without needing to speak. Her small stature, once seen as a disadvantage, now seemed like a symbol of the very message she was preaching. In a galaxy of towering figures, it was her quiet strength and her unwavering belief in her cause that had drawn others to her side. As she took her place on the stage, Kalen stepped forward to address the crowd. "Welcome," he began, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "We are gathered here today not to argue, not to compete for dominance, but to begin a new chapter in the history of the galaxy. Today we come together to show that strength is not measured by size or power, but by the ability to understand one another, to share in each other's burdens and triumphs." There was a murmur of agreement from the crowd, and Kalen could see that many were listening intently. The message was resonating with them. Some were skeptical, but others were beginning to open their hearts to the idea of a different kind of strength. Ziria stood beside him, her gaze sweeping over the gathered representatives. "We are not here to claim victory, to conquer, or to dominate. We are here to show that we can thrive together, to build a future where we stand united in our diversity. It is not the power we hold over others that makes us strong. It is the compassion we show each other, the willingness to listen, to learn, and to grow." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling in. Then, slowly, a representative from a far-flung system stood up, a tall, reptilian figure whose species had long been skeptical of the Nixeran's philosophy. "I've heard the words of the Zarkans and their followers," the representative said, his voice gravely and powerful. "And I have heard the words of Ziria. I've seen the destruction of war. But I've also seen the potential for peace. Perhaps it is time to put aside our differences and find a better way." The murmurs of approval rippled through the room, and Ziria's gaze met Kalen's. They both knew that this was a pivotal moment. The first cracks in the foundation of division were beginning to show. One by one, more representatives stood, offering their support or their thoughts on how they could build a future together. The forum was not without its challenges. There were still those who insisted that power and dominance were necessary for survival, and the Zarkans remained vehement in their opposition. But for every voice raised in defiance, there were two more that spoke of cooperation, of the need for change. By the end of the day, a resolution had been passed, one that laid the groundwork for future peace talks, established a mutual defense pact based on shared resources and collective security, and committed to reducing the military presence across contested territories in favor of diplomatic initiatives. Ziria and Kalen stood together, watching as the representatives filed out of the room, some with smiles, others with frowns, but all carrying a sense of something new, something transformative. The battle was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward winning the hearts and minds of the galaxy. As the two of them walked away from the forum, Kalen looked at Ziria, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Ziria smiled, her eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. "No. We started it. Now we have to keep going." And with that, the seeds of a new galaxy had been planted, and the road ahead, though uncertain, was full of promise. The weeks following the first peace forum were a whirlwind of activity. While the seeds of unity had been planted, the real work was only beginning. The galaxy, divided for so long by fear, mistrust, and the belief that power alone could secure peace, was beginning to turn its gaze toward a different path. The resolution passed at the forum had sparked new hope, but it had also ignited fierce opposition from those who saw their influence waning, especially from the Zarkan Federation. They were unwilling to let go of their vision of strength through force. Zolthar, though publicly silent after the forum, was anything but inactive. Behind the scenes, he worked tirelessly to undermine the fragile unity that had begun to take shape. His supporters began to organize more aggressively, spreading rumors and half-truths about the true motives behind Ziria's calls for peace. Some whispered that she sought to disarm the galaxy, to render them vulnerable to invasion by outside forces. Others claimed she had ulterior motives, secret alliances with enemies of the Zarkans, a desire to impose Nixeran values on others. Fear and suspicion were spreading like wildfire. Kalen had spent countless hours countering these claims, trying to reassure the galaxy's citizens that the peace process was genuine, that the desire for unity was not a mask for weakness but a call for strength through mutual understanding. But it was clear that more needed to be done. The rhetoric of division had already taken root in many sectors, and it was only a matter of time before the political fractures became physical. Ziria, however, remained resolute. She had faced countless challenges in her life, and this one was no different. What kept her going was the belief that if they could demonstrate the true power of unity, if they could show that even in the face of fear, compassion and cooperation were stronger, they could change the course of history. Do you ever wonder if we're fighting a losing battle? Kalen asked one evening as they sat together in the same garden where their conversations had begun. The stars shimmered above them, but their light seemed distant now, obscured by the storm clouds of uncertainty gathering on the horizon. Ziria glanced at him, her small frame illuminated by the soft glow of the garden's lights. I've never thought we were losing, Kalen. Even in the darkest times, I've always known we were on the right path. The hardest part is not fighting the opposition. It's convincing others that the path we've chosen is worth walking. Kalen leaned back, his eyes studying the intricate patterns of the plants around them. I hope you're right. I just keep wondering if the galaxy will ever understand. There are so many that don't want to change, they're too invested in their own power, in their own survival. They can't see that the future we're trying to build is for them too. Ziria's gaze softened and she placed a hand on his. It's not about changing them, Kalen. It's about showing them that a better way is possible. If we stay true to our vision, the galaxy will see it. Not everyone and not right away. But the more we show them the power of unity, the more we will change their hearts. For a moment, Kalen remained silent. Ziria's words had always had a calming effect on him, a reminder that their fight was not for quick results, but for something enduring. He had always admired her belief in the potential of others, even those who seemed unreachable. Meanwhile, Zolthar was making his own moves, and as much as Ziria and Kalen tried to remain hopeful, the winds of change were growing more dangerous. A military coup led by hardline Zarkan generals was beginning to take shape. Several key systems, once neutral, were now aligning themselves with the Zarkan agenda, enticed by promises of power and security. It was clear that Zolthar had gained enough support to mount a serious challenge. It wasn't long before a message from one of Kalen's informants came through, a warning. The Zarkans were planning a full-scale attack on a peaceful system that had openly declared its support for the peace talks. They had planned to frame it as a preemptive strike to defend themselves against potential Nixeran aggression. Ziria, Kalen said urgently, his voice filled with determination. The Zarkans are moving against us. A military strike is imminent. They're attacking the Xander system, a key supporter of the peace talks. Ziria's expression remained unchanged, though her eyes burned with resolve. I knew this day would come. We can't let them control the narrative. We have to act fast. If the galaxy sees us as the aggressors, we'll lose everything we've worked for. Kalen nodded. The situation was dire. If the Zarkans successfully framed the Nixerans as aggressors, it would incite a full-scale war, and that would undo any progress they had made. The very future they were fighting for would be at risk. Together they quickly devised a plan. The first step was to send an urgent message to the leaders of the Xander system, urging them to remain calm and resist any provocation. The second was to reach out to their allies across the galaxy, urging them to mobilize for a defensive position, not out of fear, but to demonstrate that peace was worth protecting. And third, perhaps the most important move, they would take their message to the people directly. Ziria would address the galaxy's citizens in a live transmission, calling for unity and peace. They had to show that even in the face of aggression, they would stand firm in their belief that the galaxy could be united without war. As they prepared for the coming days, the tension between them was palpable. Kalen's mind raced with strategy, and Ziria, ever the calm presence, maintained her quiet focus. The world around them felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for a spark to ignite. The broadcast was set to go live at the break of dawn. Ziria stood in front of the holographic camera, her posture unwavering. Kalen stood by her side, watching as the technicians made their final preparations. When the signal was ready, Ziria took a deep breath and the broadcast began. People of the galaxy, her voice echoed across the vast expanse of space, I stand before you, not as a representative of the Nixerans, but as a member of a greater family. A family that stretches across countless worlds, united by the belief that peace, understanding and cooperation are the true path to strength. We have heard the cries of those who wish for war, who believe that division and fear will protect us. But I ask you now, what has fear ever truly protected us from? Her words were slow, deliberate, and filled with the weight of the moment. Kaelin stood beside her, feeling the magnitude of what they were attempting. They were not just appealing to the minds of the galaxy's leaders, they were speaking to the hearts of its citizens. Ziria continued. We stand at a crossroads. We can choose to fight, to surrender ourselves to the forces of destruction, or we can choose to stand united. It is not power that holds us together, but the will to understand, to share our burdens, to face the future together. A silence fell over the galaxy as her message spread far and wide. Her words resonated deeply with those who had already begun to question the old ways. People from across the galaxy, from peaceful systems to those embroiled in conflict, tuned in, their hearts touched by the sincerity of her message. When Ziria finished, Kaelin felt a stirring hope, a quiet but growing certainty that they had just taken a crucial step. The galaxy was listening. The Zarkans were not idle. As expected, they launched their attack on the Xander system, but they were met with unexpected resistance. The forces of the galaxy's peaceful factions did not retaliate with force, but with a display of unity, a massive, non-violent blockade that demonstrated their strength was not in war, but in their shared resolve to protect the peace. In the days that followed, the Zarkans found themselves isolated. The broader galaxy, shocked by the attack, began to rally behind Ziria's vision. The narrative had shifted. It was no longer a battle between aggressors, it was a battle for the future of the galaxy. Ziria and Kaelin had shown that even in the face of violence, unity was the true source of power. The Zarkans, seeing their support crumble, were forced to negotiate. The threat of war, once imminent, began to dissipate. The message of peace, backed by action, had proven stronger than even the might of the Zarkan military. It wasn't an easy victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Ziria and Kaelin stood together, knowing that the galaxy was not yet healed, but that the path they had set upon was one that would lead to a future unlike any the galaxy had ever known. One built not on fear but on the strength of unity, understanding, and love. And so, the galaxy began to rebuild. Slowly but surely, it moved toward the vision Ziria and Kaelin had always believed in. A future where size, power, and fear no longer dictated the course of events. The true power lay in connection, in shared purpose, and in the understanding that no matter how small or insignificant one might feel, everyone had a part to play in the story of the galaxy. For Ziria, the petite alien who had once been underestimated, and Kaelin, her steadfast ally, the journey was far from over. But for the first time, they truly believed that the galaxy's future could be as bright as the stars themselves. The months that followed the Xander crisis marked a turning point in the galaxy's long, turbulent history. What had once seemed an impossible dream, a galaxy united not by force but by the strength of understanding, was slowly becoming a reality. The Zarkan Federation's power, though still formidable, was waning as more systems chose the path of peace. Ziria's message had taken root deeply in the hearts of the galaxy's citizens. Her vision of unity, compassion, and mutual respect began to transform the way governments, cultures, and individuals viewed one another. But the road to lasting peace was never without its challenges. Ziria and Kaelin had continued their tireless efforts, visiting system after system, leading discussions and hosting forums. The unspoken truth was that despite their growing influence, the scars of war and division had left deep marks. There were still pockets of resistance, hardline factions that refused to relinquish their grasp on power. Zolthar, though cornered, had not yet fully given up. His followers, too, were still active in trying to sow discord, spreading fear and lies about the Nixern vision. But something had shifted. The more the galaxy witnessed Ziria's example, the way she faced adversity with compassion, the way she encouraged others to act with patience and understanding, the more it became clear that her strength was not just a rallying cry, it was a guiding force. One evening, after a long day of speeches and meetings, Kaelin and Ziria found themselves walking through the same peaceful garden that had witnessed so many of their critical conversations. This time, however, there was a sense of quiet relief in the air. Though the work was far from over, the results were undeniable. More and more, systems were starting to form alliances not out of fear, but out of a shared commitment to Ziria's vision. "Do you think we've truly turned the corner, Kaelin?" Ziria asked, her voice gentle but carrying the weight of someone who had seen so much yet never lost faith. Kaelin's gaze lingered on the vibrant plants around them, once dull, now alive with color and growth. It felt like a perfect metaphor for everything they had fought for. "I believe we've started a journey that's irreversible," he said. "There will always be setbacks, there will always be resistance. But there is now a deep current of change that can't be ignored. Ziria smiled, though it was a smile tinged with the fatigue of someone who had never stopped striving, even when victory was uncertain. It's been a long road, hasn't it? Kalen nodded, his heart swelling with pride for the woman who had changed the very course of the galaxy. But we're not finished yet. We've only just begun. As they walked, Kalen thought back to the many challenges they had faced: diplomatic obstacles, the ever-present threat of war, the constant pressure to conform to the ideals of the powerful. But through it all, Ziria had remained unshaken. Her belief in unity, in the idea that the galaxy could be brought together, had never wavered. And it was this unshakable conviction that had carried them through the darkest moments. The Zarkan Federation, seeing the shift in sentiment, had called for one final confrontation. Zolthar, in his desperation, had sent a message to all allied forces, calling for an attack on the peaceful sectors, claiming that Nixran interference had gone too far. It was a move born of last-ditch defiance. He knew that if he didn't act now, his grip on power would slip away entirely. The galaxy held its breath, knowing this could be the final moment of reckoning. Would the peace movement be crushed under the weight of military might, or would the galaxy stand firm in its newfound belief in unity? Ziria and Kalen, along with their closest allies, held an emergency summit to decide their next course of action. The air was thick with tension, and as the final details of the plans came into view, Ziria stood at the center of the room, her presence as commanding as ever. "This is not our fight, but it is our stand," she said, her voice steady, though every word carried the gravity of the moment. "We will not wage war. We will not retaliate with violence. We will face this with the strength of what we have built, a united galaxy, one that stands together in the face of division." The room fell silent, the leaders of dozens of worlds listening intently. It was a risky move. If Zolthar and his supporters had their way, the galaxy could descend into chaos. But Ziria's unwavering resolve shone through. She continued, "We cannot afford to fight them on their terms. If we do, we become them. This is not a war for power, it is a battle for the soul of the galaxy. We will show them that the people do not need to be ruled by fear. We will show them that strength lies not in domination but in cooperation. We will protect those who cannot defend themselves, and we will prove that peace is a force that cannot be broken." Kalen, standing by her side, nodded in agreement. "We won't act out of anger or fear. We will act with hope. We will protect those who believe in a better future, and we will make sure they are heard." For a moment, the leaders around them exchanged glances. This was a defining moment. The choice was theirs: to join Ziria in her call for peace, or to give in to the forces of war that still threatened to consume the galaxy. One by one, the leaders stepped forward, pledging their support. And though the Zarkans and their allies continued their threats, it became clear that their war could not stand against the overwhelming unity that now existed. The galaxy, as fractured as it had once been, had found a new strength in each other. The day of the confrontation arrived, and the galaxy watched as Zolthar's fleet gathered on the edge of the peaceful system. Tensions were high, and many feared that the worst would come to pass. But Ziria and Kalen stood at the forefront, leading the peaceful factions in their defense, not with weapons but with diplomacy, strength, and an unshakable belief in the cause they had fought for. In a bold and unprecedented move, Ziria sent a final message to Zolthar, requesting a meeting, a one-on-one conversation. She requested a chance to speak with him not as enemies, but as two beings trying to protect what they believed was best for their people. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as Zolthar agreed, intrigued by the audacity of Ziria's offer. When the two of them met, it was not in a place of battle or conflict, but in a neutral zone, a place where both sides could be heard. Ziria's message was clear: "We have both lost so much, but we do not have to lose more. We can build a future that benefits all of us, not through violence, but through understanding and cooperation." Zolthar, a man of great pride and stubbornness, listened intently. And for the first time in a long time, he saw the vision that Ziria had been speaking of. He saw it not just as a dream but as a real possibility. The Zarkans, with all their might, could never dominate the galaxy if they continued to fight against the current of unity. In the end, it was Zolthar himself who made the unexpected choice to withdraw. The war was averted, and the peace movement had triumphed. Against all odds and despite the lingering divisions, the galaxy had taken its first steps toward a new future. Months later, Ziria and Kalen stood side by side on the steps of the Council's new headquarters, a building now representative not just of a unified government, but of a united galaxy. The sun was setting in the distance, casting a warm glow across the horizon. "We did it," Kalen said quietly, his hand gently brushing against hers. "We truly did it?" Ziria smiled, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "No, Kalen. We didn't do it alone. We did it together. All of us." And as they looked out over the vast, peaceful expanse before them, it was clear that the galaxy, once torn apart by division, had been reborn, stronger, united, and ready to build a future not of war but of hope. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the galaxy could see the bright light of a new dawn on the horizon. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.